All right. Well, I was going to make it a big grand thing once I hit record, but we'll just start like this. So, Miss Lian Brook-Tyler, when did you reached out to me a couple weeks ago and said, "Hey, we need to do a webinar together." We both have gone through different journeys. I was looking at the last time you and I did an interview. You interviewed me in 2015. It's 5 years
Yeah.
ago that around.
Wow, of course, yes, 2020. 5 years.
5
Wow.
years, yeah, and it was actually I think in February, if I believe. So really close to literally
Goodness.
5 years.
Yeah.
And at that time, your podcast was called the Born Happy Show, right?
Wow. Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moved over
Yes.
now to Primal Happiness, which we're going to discuss. So even in the names that we have, even with our journeys, we kind of switched our names and things like that. But you and I have had different journeys, but similar in the way that we've we've learned more, we've discovered more, we've kind of pushed and prodded and kind of wanted to see where this journey takes us. And what I love about you is you've never been afraid to ask questions. You've never been afraid to kind of deep dive a little bit deeper, right? And see um, whether it's for your own curiosity, whether it's to see what the community, wherever community you're in, what they say. And I've loved that about you. And I feel like that's how I've kind of been in that respect. And for that reason, I think this is going to be an incredible conversation because when you reached out to me a couple weeks ago, you said, I kind of want to, where are you with the three principles? Where are you with your journey? I have had a lot of shifts and I'd love to talk about it with your group. And I think there's a lot of questions in our community, a lot of disillusionment, so to speak, about, okay, I got the principles. Now what? What do I do? Do I just keep talking about the principles? Am I allowed to do other things like yoga? Who knows? So I wanted to get your perspective because, like I said, you have this aura of confidence, aura of playing in this world with whatever you've been given, whether it's the principles, whether it's the divine feminine, whether it's whatever that I've seen you play with. And if you're open to it, let's start with that. Like, what made you want to contact me to have this conversation?
Yeah. So, and first of all, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for your acknowledgement of what you see in me and how I show up. And likewise, the very reason I reached out to you specifically, Amir, is I feel you have this really rare quality of being willing to make your mark, very boldly, even setting up this group with the name it has and the tone it has, real bold move. And yet this real openness, like willingness to hold within that container all kinds of conversations, all kinds of different viewpoints, all kinds of explorations, which I love that so much about you, and really saw this is one of the very few people I could have this kind of conversation with. And I think it's a conversation which, firstly, I'm going to really dig having, it's a really juicy conversation, but I also felt that it's a conversation that I sometimes have sort of in private, behind the scenes, maybe with a client that's come from a three-piece background, but it's a conversation I certainly haven't heard out there in the wild, in public settings. And I just felt that, maybe it is a conversation that people want to be part of, want to hear being spoken about. So that was my sense of it. I feel like at the moment I'm just sort of setting the scene rather than going right to it, but that was really my motivation, like to have a conversation, not with really any agenda as to like what exactly we speak about, but just being willing to, oh, my dogs are going crazy, I might need to let them out in a sec, just being willing to make contact with whatever wants to be made contact with in this conversation, in this setting, in this group of people. And let me just let the dogs out.
Yeah, for sure.
They're
Sure.
not used to being here at this time of day. Give me a sec.
No problem.
Felix, really, let the dogs in, please. Yeah, so that's my sense of it. And something else I'll say before we get started is, it's taken me to this point to be able to show up with enough of an open heart and an open mind to have this conversation. A year ago, probably even 6 months ago, I couldn't. I think I'd had a lot of very deep experiences within the 3Ps community, which were, you know, lots really, really valuable, and I'm so grateful for. And then as I kind of moved out of it, I was seeing a lot that felt toxic, even I'd say, to me personally, and to people who were kind of stuck at certain places within it. And I was very much in reaction to that for some time. And it's only been, like I say, probably the last 6 months or so that I've got to a place where I have a degree of altitude where I can really see, you know what, there is actually real value there. There's something there that I'm not in a place where I now need to kind of dismiss that or make that wrong. I can hold a space for that and for other things that I see have value or enjoy or whatever. So this is very much kind of been a personal journey to get this point where I can even have this conversation too. So that's kind of what's brought me here to you and to this point in time.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know it was like that, that in the last 6 months you've made that kind of transition. And so from that point of view, and I think that's one of the things we also, both you and I, kind of have inequality is we can be in a group and look at it from an outsider point of view, which I think is extremely valuable. That when you're in a community and you're just kind of, you know, looking at it with your blinders on, you miss a lot. And so the principles as a philosophy, as principles are absolutely incredible. But as soon as humans get involved, it just kind of gets a little bit tricky, I think. So let's go with what you've seen, and let's start with you first. What have you? So let's talk about, first of all, in 2015 when you did the Born Happy show, were you strictly principles at that time? Like, when?
Yes, very much so. So it launched in, I think it must have been July 2013, I think. And at that time, it very much was so. So you said 2015 was when you came on the show.
Yeah.
That's right, isn't it? And so, yes, I think at that point, so probably for the first, it's hard to really keep track, but probably for the first 2 years, I'd say, the show and our work, myself and the co-founder of Born Happy and then Primal Happiness, Jonathan Wilkinson, we were very much coming from a wholly principles perspective in the conversations we hosted on the podcast, in the work that we did with Happy Schools and then Thrive, was very much from a 3Ps perspective. And at that point, I did that with my kind of wholehearted sense of this is the most serving thing that we could be doing, for sure. So yes, in the short answer to your question is yes, it very much was at that time.
So what was the evolution? What made you start to go, wait a minute, if anything, and maybe not a wait a minute moment, but what made you move slowly to seeing something different? Or however I would put that.
Yeah, there's probably quite a few like individual wait a minute moments. And something I was pondering earlier, and I think I shared this with you when we chatted before Christmas, that was maybe an early, almost like alarm bell that almost acted like this kind of touchstone that I kept coming back to every now and again, which was, I'm not going to name names. People can draw their own conclusions as to who I'm talking about here, but I was at a 3Ps retreat back around that kind of time, 2014-ish. And at that point, I was like a raving evangelist, like 3Ps biggest fan for sure. And one of the facilitators we had, really like one of the very, very top, and if not the kind of longest standing 3Ps teacher, one of them, was facilitating. And there was a day where in previous retreats, they'd always had someone come in and teach yoga in the mornings, or there'd be like every day there'd be a session of yoga. And this day we were told we can't have a yoga session because this teacher doesn't feel that it's appropriate to have that alongside a retreat that's for the 3 principles. Like there was I'm not going to kind of pretend I can remember exactly the wording that was used, but there was a very clear sense of it's in conflict to have this sense of this is almost the one answer you need for everything. If you have a deep understanding of the principles, deeply grounded the principles, that's all you need. Therefore, to have yoga is almost against that. It's almost, I guess, weakening or diluting that message. And there was that really jarred for me. That really kind of like made me start to question, like, that feels odd to me. I respect that's the person's choice, but it did feel there was definitely something that made me uneasy about that. And going back to those kind of like moments, like you said, that we had sort of like, is there something more that we want to include in our work, or is there other areas we want to look? I think first of all, it was very much sort of seeing how our human bodies, us as animals, what does it take for us to thrive here? So there's the, put into simple terms, if we see the three principles as a path to connect with spirit, there's also these human bodies that can often get very forgotten and neglected and disassociated from if our sole focus is that path. And at some points that makes so much sense. At some points in our lives, on our journeys, that total focus on spirit makes a lot of sense. And at some points it can be really helpful to look elsewhere. And that for us was that point when we started looking at, so what is the role of connecting into this animal of the human body, and what serves it, and what it's evolved for over the time that humans have been here? So that was starting to really become more and more part of our teaching. So by the time we launched Thrive, there was very much this kind of, we saw the piece around spirit. So at that point, again, we were seeing it as the path that we were choosing was the three principles. That was still very much part of our work. And we saw there's other things that fundamentally humans really benefit from including. So I can't actually remember when we decided to relaunch as Primal Happiness. I suspect that was, I don't know, I really lose track of time, maybe 2016, I think maybe. And that was the reason for that. The idea was the primal element was all the things I was talking about, that sense of the human animal and our primal heritage, and looking at how Indigenous people live and what allows them to thrive. And then the happiness piece was very much pointing to kind of like inner happiness, connection to spirit. So that's where, like, what really all those bits made up that sense of, it feels like to be true to where we are and what we're seeing now, we need to be clear, like, we're not just about the principles anymore. Now we're including something else.
Wow. I it's funny, you said that with the not funny, but with the yoga thing. I one of the things about the principles for me that rocked my world wasn't the principles themselves, was that I can get away from thinking and being back into experience, to that primal space, actually, which is ironic that you're saying it, where I had this sense of freedom of being my feminine energy, my masculine energy, crying, happy, like all the emotions were like in high definition. And it was for me in that moment, happened to be that I was at a Michael Neal event and he had said something extremely trivial that I made me go, wow, I've been in a lot of world of concepts, and he just made it go away, or it went away, I should say. And ironically, I got to the same place as you, which is I had this freedom to be human, freedom to be this thing that I didn't know I could be, whatever it was going to show up. And then I reverted back to, then I got to read more principle stuff. Then I got to maybe study it more. And I was actually going away from what originally gave me this sense of freedom. And I think a lot of people in our community that's what's happening, is they forget that when you discover the principles, you're not discovering more ways to be in your head. You're more ways to being out of your head, and in your body, and in your soul, and in your connectivity, and in any, whatever it is you drop into. But you're right. And then people go, no, that's not what we're trying to say. Don't get into your body. Don't do yoga, or don't do that. Is that kind of what you're pointing into? Because that's how I at least see it, but maybe you can elaborate.
Well, this is interesting. I was pondering just before this, how, where we might go with this, being very open to kind of what showed up in the moment, as well as like what would be a helpful way of explaining kind of where I see it now. And this is probably a good place to talk about this. And I love the way that Jürgen talks about this, our mutual friend Jürgen Rasmussen. He has a beautifully clear way of talking about waking up versus growing up. And so I would define that further as waking up to spirit, which is really any of those paths of enlightenment, including the three principles, but many others, like any of those, non-duality, forms of self-inquiry, Buddhism. They're forms of us waking up to spirit. So creating that separation from that being really caught in our patterns of thought, in our kind of very personalized experience, and getting some separation, some freedom, where we're able to recognize that part of something that we're, something larger that we're part of. And that, again, I see there is a real place for that. That's so freeing. And particularly, and I'd love to hear you speak more about this in a minute, Amir, I think for certain people at certain points in their life, and like in the recovery center, that is going to be like such a gorgeous, freeing, healing message to hear. Like, you aren't this person who's suffering from being in this grip of very painful habitual thinking. I'm not saying you'd say it in those words, but basically that's what you're offering them, something else to experience. So absolutely gorgeous. On the other side, and these aren't in conflict, this isn't an either or at all, this is as well, there's this other path which Jürgen describes as growing up. And so a further way to define that, and I love the way the wilderness teacher Bill Plotkin talks about this. He talks about it as a kind of like growing up of our ego, not in a kind of let's make our ego even more, inflated, but a maturation of it, where we're able to learn how to be in our body and to be with other people, be in relation with other people in a more skillful way, a more evolved or mature way. And so there's, that's a lot of kind of more traditional personal development work would probably sit there. And some of this is crossed over, so it's not as clear cut as I'm describing it, but there is very much a path there that if you get too far into one path and not the other, there's consequences there, and they both have real value. The other piece, and I would say a lot of our work that we did with Primal Happiness was in that kind of middle path, where we were looking at kind of the connections between communities, between individuals, between our bodies and our environment. The last piece, and this is a bit of a, I'm hoping Jonathan won't tell me off, this is a bit of a kind of news flash. We're just about to go through another rebirth and another new name. And so I'm actually going to share this, even though it's possible Jonathan's going to kill me. We're literally about to relaunch again, and our new name is going to be Waking the Wild. And this is to honor this like new evolution we've been going on over the last couple of years. But this is, again, us sort of taking stock and realizing, we're no longer Primal Happiness. We're about something else as well. And this third path, I sometimes describe it as rooting down. And again, this is where Bill Plotkin's work's gorgeous. It's rooting down into the soul. And that could be in indigenous traditions, shamanic traditions. This is very much that work where you're going into something that's very unique, very individual to that person. And it very much is a descent. It isn't something that I see can happen through the ascent to spirit. So they all have separate value, and they're all paths that I think can coexist, that we can, in our sovereignty, choose into being on all three paths at different points. And that's really where I am now, where we are as an organization, to recognize, knowing there's these three paths, and clearly this is just a kind of like linguistic way of describing them. It's not as clear cut really as this, but if there are these three beautiful, heartful paths, why not walk all three?
That's this metaphor came up to me. What are the three paths that you guys are pointing to?
So waking up, so to spirit. Growing up, which you could say is to, like, how would you describe it? It's kind of your ego growing up, or personal responsibility. It's hard to do that in such a neat, snappy way, but that's basically growing up as an adult human. and then rooting down to soul.
I love that. Are you guys down for a cool metaphor that really like kind of puts this all together? This is something
Do we
that
have to pay you royalties, Amir?
yeah, so absolutely. If anyone ever shares this one, give me a couple dollars. There is this old Zen story that the hand, the feet, and the mouth were going to go on strike with the stomach. Have you heard this one?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. So the hand, feet, and the mouth are going on strike because they believe the stomach's not doing much. So the feet says, look, I'm the one that does all the work. I have to go walk to the store, walk to the farm, and I'm the one, look, my feet, the feet are tired and exhausted. If it wasn't for me, you guys wouldn't have food. The hand says, are you kidding me? I'm the one who has to grab the stuff. I'm the one who has to go to the grocery store and pick up the stuff. And if it wasn't for the hands who drove you to the store, you wouldn't be where you're at. And the mouth goes, are you kidding me? If it wasn't for me, the food wouldn't get anywhere. I'm the one that has to chew the food. I has to swallow it. And so they all were fighting and bickering, right, about who has a more important role. And they all ended up saying, we're all going to go on the strike because the stomach's not even doing it. He just absorbs stuff, and he just, does some funny stuff in the stomach. Well, they all ended up, the foot stopped walking, the hand stopped using it to put it in the mouth, and the mouth stopped chewing. And you can imagine where the story goes, right? Is that the whole organism ended up dying. Because see, when you're talking about waking up to the spirit, growing up to the ego, rooting the soul, there's no such thing as I'm the best one. Because it's not a mechanism, we're an organism. And one of the things that I see in our community is it's become mechanistic. It's only the principles. So forget about yoga. But there's so much, that's kind of like the hand saying it's not the feet, right? It's an organism. It's a symbiotic relationship. And so that's why, like when I go to my community at the recovery center and I say a joke and there's a belly laughter, 10 years of the principles can be resolved with one belly laughter and them seeing something from that space of in the moment experience, in the moment, like primal, like laughing that you can't get from simply a teaching, right? And not saying you can't get it, but you can also get it with something like that, a very deep cry, a very deep laughter, a very deep confusion, a very deep anything, right? And so what I've discovered in what I've seen moving forward is the principles are definitely, for me, the foundation, right? When I say the foundation, the principles to me is the feet and the hands and the mouth and all of it as well. But you cannot dismiss the whole body as well. You can't dismiss one piece of the body. And that's one of the things that I think you're pointing to. And it's funny that you mentioned 3 things. And I'm like, that's so funny because the Zen story talks about the 3 body parts, right? And the 3 principles. And everyone has this thing with the 3s. But I think stepping away from what I've seen, I'm not stepping away from the principles. I'm stepping away from the ideas that people share around what people think the principles are, what spirituality is. It just seems, and even non-duality, now that's coming to the scene. And what I'm hearing or what I'm seeing is everyone's talking about the best apple pie recipe online, but no one's actually tasted the pie yet. They're just talking about, well, no, if you add 2 eggs, and the non-duality says it's not 2 eggs, it's 1 egg, it's the one perfect egg, and that's the, and so if you have that egg to cook with, and someone's saying, no, you need to add butter, and then there's someone, and everyone's arguing ingredients, but no one's actually made the freaking cake. And what is making the cake? Going and being in life, doing yoga, hugging having sex with your wife or husband, being in nature, smelling the salt, smelling the ocean. And to me, that's a organism at that point. The whole experience becomes spiritual. I don't know if I'm making sense. This is just coming to me right now, but the whole experience becomes spiritual. And that's why when someone says, no, don't do this because the principles are the only way. Well, what are the principles at the end? What I'm seeing is if any ideology becomes a conclusion about life, it's going to miss the point. Because
Mm,
at the end of the day, what we're trying to point to is that this experience is fucking amazing. Now, whether
yeah.
you find that through non-duality, whether you find that through bicycling, whether you find that through a divorce, you will see something, right? It's not, and that's what they. So when you say it's really good for people in my recovery center to hear the principles, it's not the principles that changes them. It's that they actually get back into life.
Mm-hmm.
That's what moves people. It's not, oh, I went home and now it's mind, consciousness, and thought. It's, oh my God, this is the first time I've seen my wife from
Mm,
this point of view. It's the first time I've gone to my job from experiencing it all and not being afraid, or being afraid and going through the experience. In other words, the totality of their experience looks different from a new light.
yeah,
So
I love that. I love that. Um, what was coming to me as you talking, I was thinking dogmatic about an
I,
ideology, and as you were just speaking about, I think this is actually true for pretty much all spiritual traditions. There almost maybe needs to be a bit of dogma there for it to kind of give us that focus and that sense of like, this works, this is true. Maybe there needs to be some dogma, I don't know, but I think there also can be, and I've definitely been guilty of this in the past, almost a such a rejection of that, that almost becomes dogmatic. And again, going back to what I was saying, I think it's taken really the last 6 months or so for me to let go of that kind of dogmatism against dogma. But I think the more we're able to get that altitude, that sovereignty, to be able to see all of these different parts, all of these different aspects of, as you say, that organism, that gives us such great choice. And that could be, if we again see that there's a real point to following the path to spirit, and there's actually many paths to it. I love the book's finders for this, because it's so clear there that there are all these different ways. There isn't one way, there's no right way, there maybe isn't even a better way, I don't know. um, and looking at it through that lens, it's very hard to be then so dogmatic, because you're kind of like, how can you say this is the right way when all these other ways seem to allow people to get access to that connection, that deep experiential connection to spirit that we are seeing is valuable? So I think that starts to create a bit of humility and a bit of openness, which is, I think, a lot more helpful than having to stay in this rigid box of this is the only truth and this is the only way this truth can even be spoken about, which is where we start to get, isn't it? Where people start to correct, oh no, it's not thought with a lowercase t, it's thought with a capital T. Actually, thought doesn't even exist because it's all oneness. It's like, just recognizing maybe all of this is nonsense, and it can also have value if we just decide, this is the path that I'm empowering, this is the path that I'm seeing could create that connection that I'm looking for. And it's, again, going back to my kind of wider point, it's not the only kind of horse in town either. That's going to give me this, and there's these other aspects which we can play with if we're interested in. It, for me, there was a real, having had some very, very deep spiritual experiences where it was just undeniable to me that there was something far greater that I was connected to. There were points where that was just such a deep part of my experience. I had no doubt. And I thought that was everything. I thought that was all there was on offer. And then over the last couple of years, getting that sense of what my soul is calling me to, what my soul desires, I had no idea that even existed. And it's not to say everyone has, it's not to say, again, this is like a truth. It's not to say that everyone has to have that experience, but to even know that's on offer, even to have an opportunity to experience that, again, to me, has some value.
yeah, it's and just for those that are here, please, if you have any questions or any comments, please raise your hand. We'd love to hear from you as well. So let us know if you want to. Yesterday, I went to my recovery center yesterday, and I was talking about the principles, as I do, or whatever comes up at the time, or it was on Monday actually. And I could see in the middle of it, there were just kind of people were kind of veering off and they were getting tired, and it was a Monday, so and I'm the first group in the morning, and I happened to have a magic trick in my pocket, so I brought the magic trick and I said, I'm going to do a magic trick, and I ended up doing a magic trick, and I got a standing ovation and people were clapping and laughing, and at the end of the group, this one of the ladies came up to me and she said, I I heard what you were saying about the principles, but I understood it when you did the magic trick, because when I'm busy being curious, when I'm busy being happy, when I'm busy being in the magic trick with you, I forget that I'm an alcoholic. I forget who I think I am. And I said, that's the principles. That's what we're pointing to. Now, again, so would I go tell people, go learn a magic trick and then no, that's not what I'm pointing to. But at the end of the day, what I'm pointing people to, I could, and it's a great way, actually. That's why magic is so appealing, is because it messes with our senses. It makes us question our reality. It makes us very curious, and it gets us very involved. If there was more people that are curious, involved, and excited for things in life, I assure you there'd be less wars. I assure you there'd be more magic in the world. And that's what, at the end of the day, when I'm sharing the principles, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to make a conclusion about what I think is true. I'm trying to get them back into experiencing life. Right? That's my end result. And so when someone comes to me and says that I can forget to be an alcoholic for that 10 minutes you did a magic trick, well, I wonder what kind of implications that'll have in the rest of their time. That if they can say, wait a minute, if I can forget for 10 minutes, what would an hour do if I forgot that I'm because the next class they might be saying, hi, my name is Bob, I'm an alcoholic. But what if they go, my name is Bob, and for the last hour I wasn't an alcoholic? And what if I don't do that for the next 2 hours? What if I'm Bob who hasn't been an alcoholic for 24 hours? At some point, I'm going to forget that identity. I'm just going to be Bob, or I'm just going to be whatever you want to, whatever I'm going to be in that moment. That to me is the magic. And we miss it. We miss it because we say, no, it has to be from that point of view. It has to be from that point of view. And again, if it's from that point of view, it's just going to be a better recipe for pie again. And I don't want to be that. I want to, Ram Dass had a beautiful quote. He said, nothing is as tasty as reality. Nothing is as tasty as reality. And I love that quote because there's so much truth to that. When I got the principles, the minute I got it, I was smart enough to say, I'm done with it for a while. Let me go see from this point of view what life looks like. And it is incredible. It's when I went back into the principles and I try to study it more and become practitioner and all this that I just lost that experience again. And then, of course, from that point of view, I must have been doing it wrong. It wasn't that I was doing it wrong. It was that I went back to the cookbook instead of the kitchen, so to speak, right?
Yeah, instead of the pie.
So
yeah,
I'm reading. Let me see. I relate. So let's see what people are saying. My awareness of the principles has brought everything into focus, physical and in every way. We use the word clarity a lot, but it really does describe how I feel. Physically, I fit, and every physical experience seems enhanced. I agree. I agree to that. I relate to this so much in my own life and work, and Amir and Lian, you guys are beautiful and wise. I hope more will follow in your path of understanding that there is more than one way, and all can be beautiful. Hope to see all more soon. Yeah. Well, thank you, guys. Thank you. Dominic as well, valuable conversation. And Pramila, you're talking about the 8 limbs of yoga before they got thingified. Yeah, this is, I don't think this is new. I mean, we're the idiots that now say, oh, we got it. People have been figuring, people have seen this for centuries. This is nothing that, that to me is new. It's new to me, but they've been discussing the totality of our experience, the totality of the physical, the mind, the soul, the ego, connecting it all for a very long time. And where are you going with this now? So let's say, here's my question to you. Let's say there's people that are disillusioned in our community, that they found the principles, that it blew their mind, but now they're at the, so now what? Or do I go more into the principles? Is there, like, I know this is now becoming a prescription, but what do you think would be valuable for people?
Lovely question. I would say my approach I think more and more, and actually this is, I was just, as you were talking about when you first came across the principles, I was just recalling what I used to be like. So I just want to share this first, because it's going to sound, as I talk, that I'm just so wise and open and amazing. And I just want to share this first, so you just like get this in perspective. When I had one of those real kind of bolt out of the blue, just boom moments when I came across the principles, where I literally read a line on a blog post and it just set my like mind on fire in a good way, that in that moment I just saw all of my thoughts, all of my beliefs at kind of one remove. And it seemed at the time almost like a kind of merry-go-round, going round like a carousel of these different thoughts. And I was like, wow, that's thought? No way, that is? And it was just kind of happened in a moment, which was clearly incredible. What I can see now, which is hysterical looking back, but also so human, was I thought that that moment of just pure magic was only possible through some, like, almost like, what were the words? It can't have been that particular sentence, because clearly that particular sentence isn't going to have that effect on anyone. But it must be something to do with a certain way of telling people about the principles that I can now see, but how do I let them know? And I got very fixated and very, like, I think I'm naturally very passionate and like love evangelizing on things. And so I was just like the just worst evangelist. But so wanted other people to see this. So wanted, like, if I could only get the right way of saying it, and if they could just see it, it would create that moment for them. And so I just want to say that, first of all, I was absolutely there, like just one of those people that wanted all my friends, all my family, anyone I came into contact with to have a bit of that, you know, like whatever that is, like how can I just give that to them in the most perfect, succinct way? And then over the years realized it wasn't quite as simple as that. So I just wanted to say that first, to say where I am now, realizing like, yeah, it just doesn't work like that, just absolute nonsense. And more really recognizing the importance of treating people with real love and compassion, yes, but also not kind of not treating people as children or victims. You know, we've all got this part in us that's so powerful, so sovereign, and really recognizing that in another human being, respecting that, and kind of like helping them to call that forth, so they're actually making those choices for themselves, so they're not locked into, if I could just listen to this teacher more, or follow these instructions more, or just find what the next right step is. I more and more see there is such value, and also more enjoyment, more richness in pointing people back to their own sense of what's going to serve them. So I just want to, anything I say after that point, I really want to like make that clear. I have no flipping idea what the right path is for anyone. What I would say is, if someone's listening to this and there's someone who actually is having a wonderful experience of life in this path of the principles, I'm not making that wrong whatsoever. Like, that is perfect, glorious, like, keep going. Like, I'm no way saying that is, you know, wrong, used up, redundant, or anything. If for whatever reason it might be you feel that you've kind of reached a plateau and you're ready for something to explore elsewhere, it might be that you just feel this like deeper calling to something. Again, I see more and more, this is like our soul uses opportunities to say, like, you know, tap us on the shoulder, you know, hey, look at this, is this for you? Hey, book that, I don't know, trip, or go meet that person. Those opportunities that our soul's calling us to something. Or it could be, like me, I'm just like intensely curious. I get bored really quickly. I just want to explore everything. And so to me, it's just like, why not? So I would say, if you're feeling some of those things, I can definitely recommend a bunch of resources, but I'd say first and foremost, just give yourself that kind of invitation and permission that it's okay. You don't have to stay fixed into this, like, oh, right, in order to step outside and look at things outside the principles, I have to almost like give up my 3Ps membership or like leave the tribe. You don't. I have a lot of my clients, my one-to-one clients, and also people that have joined our groups, Waking the Wild Masculine, Waking the Wild Feminine. I'd say the majority have come from a 3 principles background. Some of them past, some of them current. And they can do both. We're never going to say to them, like, drop that, leave that. No one's going to, we talk about jokingly the 3Ps police. They don't really exist. No one's going to come and boot you out. So it's okay. Just give yourself permission to follow your curiosity, follow those nudges, those signs, whatever appeals to you. That's okay. You can do both. You can do it all.
Yeah, I love that. And Mary has Mary, will you jump on real quick? I think this is a really important one, and I'd love to hear what you said, so I don't have to read it. If you don't, unless you want me to read it.
Yeah, sure. No.
Oh, hey, hi, how are you? It's good to see you.
Hello, Mary.
Hi, Lian. Long time no talk.
Yeah. A lovely elfin face.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask you guys if you have seen this too, because it's a very common trend that I've noticed in people is they come across the principles and they seem to fall into this state of inaction, like a complacency sets in, a continual searching for that quote unquote good feeling. And if they don't have it, they think they're doing something wrong. Continual conference going and training and learning. And in the meantime, they don't seem like they're actually enjoying life at all. It's like they're kind of going through the motions and not actually living. And it's been tricky because I can't relate to that, Lian. You may remember from when we talked, I had the complete opposite thing happen. Or it was like, suddenly I was like, oh, yay, I can live now. Let me go do that, So it's been hard for me to relate to this trend that I see. So I'm just curious to know if you've seen that as well.
Yeah, do you want to speak to that first? Funny enough, my experience was very similar to yours, Mary. Like, it literally gave me permission to just like, oh my goodness, I don't need to listen to all that nonsense and the fear and all that anymore. But I've always been a very active, outgoing, do all the things person, but it kind of took it to another notch. So my experience was very much like yours. So I have got some things to say about what I've noticed about people who do have that experience that you've described, but I'd like to hear what Mir's got to say on it first. I think he can relate more to that searching, I think, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I totally agree with you with the complacency. It's funny because when I got the principles, I had the same experience as you, Mary. I don't know if you did this, but for me, I had all these NLP books and hypnosis books. They were thrown out the trash. I didn't have like anything anymore that I needed to read. I mean, I went back and reread like Alan Watts and Osho. That came alive, like things that I was like going back and thought I knew. Like I got it. I could sit next to Alan Watts and have a 4-hour conversation. We'd get it. And so the complacency, I think, for me, or the lack of confidence and all that, for me, and I'll speak personally, is when I started to conceptualize the principles again instead of going to the experience that I found from it. I don't know if that makes sense, but the experience I got from it let me forget about even the principles. The principles were the gap between me and my experiences. And so that was where it pointed me to. And then the very thing that got me to experience life, I got suckered back into the concept of it, right? And that's why I even created the What the F or the principles group. And the irony is, people think I'm an outlier, I'm the outcast, or I'm trying to ruffle feathers. But I'm not trying to ruffle feathers. That's not my. Well, it is. Oh, don't get me wrong. Okay, me and Dominic do ruffle feathers. I'll scratch that. But like people who know me, like Penny and Pramila, who've been in some of my groups and things like that, like my goal is for us to be there, laugh, have fun, enjoy it, because seriousness is the disease. It's the seriousness that got me into my thinking, into my head, into all the things I wanted to learn. Like when I go to the recovery center, I remember they said, I just want to let you know, it's a lot of the stuff people are going through, it's very serious. So, you know, you got to make sure you take it seriously. And I don't take it seriously. The problem is the alcoholic takes it very seriously. That the person that they're told they're a fuck up their whole life takes that very seriously. So no wonder they're having a miserable life. The ones that are enjoying life, like Mary just mentioned, when you come from that space of like freedom and humor and passion, why would you not want to go out and play a song? Why would you not want to go out and dance? It makes no sense. It would make life would make no sense in any other way, for me at least, that I've seen. And so the complacency, if you go talk to the people that are becoming complacent in our community, they're really in their heads about it, right? Oh, someone told me that I should not look in this direction. I should look in this direction. I'm going, what are you talking about with direction? Go grab a coffee with me. Like, what is this direction nonsense? Let's go walking in the park. Let's do yoga, but don't tell the person that was telling you that. But you know what I mean? And so you start to find, like Penny said, you find joy in everything, because everything is joyous when you're not in a conceptual idea of the world. Everything tends to be joyous. And I'll give you one example, and I'll let you speak from here. I took a drug that really messed me up. That's what our podcast was 5 years ago, on the Born Happy. I'm now on testosterone replacement therapy. I take exogenous testosterone that is making me have all sorts of crazy things happening hormonally. My estrogen levels are going up. So I actually, for a moment, got to feel what it feels like for a split moment. What happens when estrogen spikes really high, happens in a certain time of the month for the opposite sex. And I got to experience, I'm sitting here so I'm looking, and I told my doctor, what is going on with me? And it's like, oh, well, you just had a really high estrogen spike right here. And then I went, what happens then? I'm like crying in commercials. I'm like in the car and listening to a song, and I think it's about me and my wife. And then, but it was cool because I didn't have to go, well, is it all thinking? I wonder what the principals say about this. I got to actually go, this is fucking cool. I'm crying over a Justin Bieber song, and I didn't have to validate it. I didn't have to philosophize it. I just got to experience it, because when am I ever going to get that experience again? So in other words, I know this
month, is same time of the month.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. I have a lot more respect for compassion now. I had no idea how much hormones play a role in our well-being, but they do. And the point of it is, though, I went through moments of crying, moments of anxiety, moments of pure bliss, and I didn't give it a name. And because I didn't give it a name, I just experienced it. All of it was gravy. All of it was good. It wasn't, man, I have super high anxiety. I wonder what Dick Bettinger would say about it in his book, or I wonder what Jack, or I wonder. There was no wondering. There was no complacency. I went and had a coffee in my anxiety to see how that felt. I went and had anxiety and went to work to see how I would treat my employees in this level of anxiety. But that awareness changed my experience to be more in it. And I don't know if that makes sense. So again, instead of going into the cookbook to see what's going on, I went to the kitchen and started baking shit while I had anxiety, while I was angry, while I was hormonal. And boy, it was glorious. It was glorious. It was fun. And so if you guys that are here, you'll see that I've been less and less in my group, because I want to see how anxiety feels like, without having to talk about it all the time. I want to go feel what it feels like to have a short temper and just experience it with my wife and see how it goes, and then discuss it with her afterwards. I want to do yoga in that state of mind and see how that feels. I want to kind of like put things on for size. And it's so much more magical than conceptualizing about it for me right now in this moment, in this space that I'm in. But I don't know if that even answered your question, Mary, but that's just kind of what I've seen. So the complacency isn't the principles. It's never the principles. It's that we think that we're going to get an answer outside of us, whether that's the principles, whether that's non-duality, whether it's another guru or a book that we think that's going to fix us or change us. So. What are
going to bring Mary back on, or shall I? I'm hanging on. I'm not sure if you wanted me to speak to it, or
yeah, I'd love to hear your.
I love what you've just said there, Amir, and it's. I was pondering what I'd noticed that was different between those two experiences. And I want to say, first of all, it's if you're someone who's had the experience as you're describing as Mary, like where it just seemed easier to take action and more confidence and more joy, it's very easy to, and Mary, I'm not making you wrong for this. I can see you're actually trying to understand, what is going on over there, but it's easy to do that from a place of like, just get with the program. Why can't you just like be in the experience, like let go of all that? And of course it's rarely that simple. When that's what makes sense to us, there's a reason that makes sense. And I love what you're saying there about kind of just being willing to be in the experience. And what I see over and over again, almost no matter what kind of path we're in, what work we're doing, what we call it, is over and over again the very real role of taking inspired action, or sometimes just taking any action. And in that act of just doing something, putting one foot in front of the other, baking the pie, whatever it might be, the willingness to, and sometimes, it's not just the willingness, it's the ability to. Sometimes when it's something so trapping, so painful, I totally get it's difficult. And when you're being fed this, like, it's not about taking action, it's just about understanding this more deeply, it's about being more grounded, you're actually being talked out of taking action. And yet again, I see the more and more we're willing to step through that, whatever's in the way, the fear, very real fear that could be showing up, the very real discomfort, in the act of being in the experience, we get to feel different things, we get to see different things, we get to expand. And that, I think, is the real difference. And I think, again, us even just having conversations like this where we say it's okay to take action, whatever that might be. I mean, sometimes we talk about this, like I remember back kind of in the days where I was kind of really in the principles community, it was like some forms of action are okay, like going for a walk or having a shower and getting an insight that way is okay, that's not a doing. But any other kind of action, oh, that's a doing you shouldn't be doing. And I'm making fun of this, and it's a bit farcical, but honestly, I have heard, as I'm sure you have, some very real kind of, you shouldn't be taking action. It's about just understanding more, listening to more teachers, listening to more talks. And I think sometimes that's perfect. And I think this conversation that you brought here, Mary, about the very real benefit of just taking some action, whatever occurs to you, often can actually be the thing that starts to free things up.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Amir and Lian, because that's what it has done for me, I should say, is that every time I find myself kind of in my head, I just go, you know what, I'm going to go do something now. Whatever's going on in my experiences, whatever it is, and I'm just going to go do the thing I want to do anyway. And if all of those feelings want to come along, great, bring them on, but I'm going to go do the thing anyway.
Yeah.
And that's how this has come alive for me.
Yeah. And it's like you've naturally just embodied that way of being. Like, it hasn't been a choice. It's just like that occurs to you, but it doesn't for everyone. And so again, I think that's really helpful for someone like you to like even just bring this conversation to life. People get to see something here that's for them. So yeah, thank you. I think that was a gorgeous thing to bring in.
Thank you.
Yeah, Fiona mentioned searching is another thought, not how the mind works. With the people I work with, they get confused and despondent because they cannot see where they are lost, because the unconscious mind is driving them. Once the trauma experience, unconscious belief that caused a lost sense, feeling, confusion is brought to the awareness, then they can let it go. Do you relate? Do you see that, Lian? Do you want to say anything about that?
You're right. Let me just. I'm doing a kind of like Google Translate in my head from Fiona's way of talking about it to kind of how the wording I would use. I'm just doing that in the moment. I need a babel fish. something that just really struck me, that was just an aside, is that, isn't it interesting how when we're like really deep in a particular paradigm, teaching, way of doing things, like that feels like you see everything through that filter. Of course, that's how we work. And it was really interesting where Fiona's brought the word thought in. And going back a few years, I feel like, you know, pretty much every podcast I did, every coaching session I did, every webinar I did, I'd be using the word thought over and over again in all sorts of ways. These days, I don't. It's so rare that I'll talk about it unless it's just in a kind of, you know, normal fashion, not a three-piece fashion. I rarely even think about my thoughts. And I don't even really think about my clients' thoughts or talk about my clients' thoughts or thinking or thought at all. And so I just want to say that first of all, because I think that's why it took me a moment to like ground into the question, because I was like, yeah, I actually haven't thought about thought in so long. So it's taken me a while to just even like get present to what is it that I see and can relate to that. What I would say, and I think this is something that isn't spoken about much in this community, that is a real piece of gold in what Fiona's saying here, is that whilst we have, if we kind of like, and I'm not saying this is true, we should see it this way. Sorry, my children just let one of the dogs back in. Let's hope he behaves. If we agree that there is a thing called subconscious and a thing called conscious, even just for the purposes of kind of like making sense of our experience, there is going to be things that affect our experience that we're not going to know are affecting our experience. Things that you could call that your blind spot, you could call it shadow, you could call it subconscious. And again, not recognizing that is always going to be there playing a part, I think it's really helpful to know. Not to get fixated on that, not to that then make that the only thing we talk about, but just to even recognize that part that we're conscious to is likely to be a small aspect of what's actually going on, everything that's at play. And so when we fixate so much on that bit of our experience, that kind of, that thought chatter, that line of thinking that goes on our mind, or the picture in our mind, and make that mean everything, like the answers are all there. If I was just not thinking about this, or I could stop thinking this, or I could think in a different way, or not even know, like not even make my thought mean anything, we're missing all this other stuff that is actually probably, I'm not going to say definitely, but probably actually having maybe even a bigger effect on our experience than that little bit that we're fixating on. And as Fiona said, for many of us, the, you know, people that have been raised in our culture often have experienced quite a lot of trauma. That could be like really obvious trauma that we would kind of say, oh yes, clearly that experience would traumatize us. But often it's more subtle than that. It's more almost like ingrained in our culture. And again, a lot of that is going to be outside of our awareness, because it's just the water we swim in, it's the air we breathe. We don't even know it's a thing. And so again, I love what you're saying there, Fiona. When we start to bring that into light and actually make contact with it, sometimes that on its own can have a transformative effect. Again, I would say often there is that like magical ingredient we just spoke about taking action. I like see over and over again, like we'd love that not to be the case. We'd love to have those like, oh my goodness, I've had an insight that changes everything and I never need to do anything. I nearly always see that we do need to take some action, but just that bringing whatever it is into our awareness in itself starts to create some spaciousness, starts to create some movement. And from there, we can do all sorts of things, you know, whether that be, my last two coaches have been archetypal coaches, kind of in the Jungian tradition. So it might be that we work through it that way. It could be that we do it via kind of somatic therapy, you know, body movement, that kind of stuff. It could be anything, but there is something very valuable in that recognition that, yes, some of my experience is at the moment outside my awareness. Bringing it into my awareness could be really helpful. So I think in my own language, I do relate, and I agree with you, Fiona. So hopefully I haven't just completely made it about something else, but that was my sense of what you said meant to me, and I thought it was a gorgeous point. Thank you.
Awesome. And we are down to the last minute. That was
Oh, we
quick.
are.
Isn't that
Mm.
crazy? I had such a good time. This has been a very different kind of chat. I'm not used to this kind of conversation, but I love this one. This was really cool. And hopefully
Mm.
I don't get
Yeah, I
banished
enjoyed
from
it.
the community. But and for those that are like, and I think you believe I believe you said it as well. This is not a bag on the three principles. The three principles to this day are still life changing to me.
Mm.
I think there's, the exploration of itself. I still love pulling Michael Neal out and listening to what he has to say. I love it. I love having conversations. However, the end all is not a teaching, any teaching. The end all for me is where I think you and I could agree is not the teaching, is what I don't know what I don't even want to say what the end all is. That is the conclusion that I've come up with. Is the end all is not the teaching. Go have a nice day. Like I wish I could say, so you should do this, but I don't have that end bit yet. And I think that's the beauty of it. And that's what I'm seeing more and more is if that's not the end all, what is it? I don't know. Let's go have coffee and find out. Let's discuss it, and let's stay up till 3 a.m. and laugh about it. But in that exploration, in being connected with Lian, in you contacting me in an email and saying, let's chat about it. That to me is living. That to me is the essence of it. Because when I get off this call, I'm going to go in my car and go to work with the biggest smile. And if that's what spirituality and living and life is, then we've done our job.
Yeah, I love
We've
that.
done our job. So,
Amir,
yeah.
we've not spoken about your hair.
Well, I'll do something special for the group. Okay, so how about that? We'll stay tuned. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So for those that are wondering what that means, hair today, gone tomorrow. It doesn't really matter, but we'll discuss it in my group in a little bit, and we'll talk about why that is why the hair is always a topic of conversation. But on that note, okay, there are many more ways to skin a cat, as my brother used to say. Yes, and then great call. Also, Rui said, "Spirit intelligence has no language." I love that, and I agree with that. And yeah, you guys.
It has hair. It has hair.
It does. It gets a bit hairy once there's no language involved. And no matter which way you do it, the cat isn't going to like it. Dominic, of course. And you guys, thank you so much. And hopefully, I've been out of the loop for a while. I haven't done a lot of these. And I'd love to do more. And so, Lian, if you want to come back on and do part 2, I'd love to do that. And if there's any questions, comments, ideas, please leave us, some in the bottom. And then this has been recorded, so this will be up on YouTube as well soon. So.
Yes, and I would love to, if there's an appetite for it, if there's questions or topics that people would like us to talk about. And I love the way that this was really kind of, it wasn't just us, I love the fact we kind of had a group conversation. I'd be more than up for that for sure.
Yes, and then for those that well, I got offered to speak at the Viva event in Spain, so I am working on going to that. And you guys, whoever shows up, you will see it's a different principles conversation than you're going to be used to. And I think that's why they invited me, and I'm really grateful for that. But there's going to be a lot more involved, and shit, there might be even yoga, who knows? But the idea is going to be for an incredibly humanistic exploration, not a mechanistic or a part. So a totality of experience. We'll see how that goes. And on that note, where can people find you? I should leave it with that.
Oh yes, thank you. And I think we actually said this audio will end up on my podcast, so that's another
cool.
way. But in fact, people always confuses me. People may well be listening to this on the podcast when it's there. So at the moment, until we've had our rebirth, it's at primalhappiness.co. And of course, that will redirect once we've, got the new site and everything. And from there, you can access our weekly podcast. We also have a free Facebook group, and then have all sorts of ways that if you want to work with us to go deeper into the kind of things we're talking about, that's all there too. So primalhappiness.co, and that's .co rather than .com or anything else.
Awesome. You guys all know where to find me. And on that note, Lian, you are awesome and amazing as always. And thank you so much for reaching out. This wouldn't have happened if you didn't email me. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I've loved this.
And thank you for everyone that joined us except Dominic Scafidi. All right. On that note, folks, I'm just kidding. I love Dominic. He's one of my favorites. Love
you.
Love all you guys. Bye, you guys. Take care.